Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. We're going to be doing very severe tariffs on Russia if we don't have a deal in 50 days, said Donald Trump upon his meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Monday afternoon. Alongside the tariffs, Trump also announced significant arms deliveries to Ukraine and NATO member states. More on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. The EU and the US battle over the final form of the trade deal. The Axiom 4 space mission begins landing procedures, having successfully completed its experiments. Iga Swiatek is back on the WTA podium after her Wimbledon victory. Donald Trump says he is very unhappy with Russia and has announced plans to deliver really massive numbers of military equipment to Ukraine during the high-stakes meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The announcement, topped with a perspective of further secondary tariffs on Russia, comes as the war is nearing what could be a significant inflection point. But everything comes with a cost, and this time will be no different. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, reports on the latest developments from the meeting of the two leaders in Washington.
Donald Trump knows how to make a statement.
We are very unhappy, I am, with Russia, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
Kyiv, Moscow and the world hanging on the US president's every word as he sat down with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the Oval Office.
We make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best of everything. The European nations know that. And we've made a deal today, and I'm going to have Mark speak about it, but we've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
And just like that, a long-awaited green light for more arms, including ammunition and, according to Trump, 17 Patriot missile defense systems set for the front line, deployed through a deal with NATO.
I would reconsider whether I should not take negotiations about Ukraine more seriously than I was doing at the moment, if I was Vladimir Putin.
It marks a shifting of the winds, reversing President Trump's previously confrontational tone with Ukraine,
If you didn't have our military equipment,
which was infamously highlighted by another encounter at the White House earlier this year.
Trump's approach to Putin's Russia is really transforming. And it seems that Trump has understood the real strategy of Putin.
Trump had previously mooted a major announcement on Russia, with frustration building fast over Vladimir Putin's reluctance to strike a ceasefire deal.
we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
And at a conference in Rome last week focused on Kyiv's recovery. This behind me is the man at the centre of Ukraine's fight against Russia. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy sounded an optimistic tone about Washington's backing.
There were strong signals about support packages for Ukraine and resolute messages regarding sanctions. I believe, or rather I'm confident, that these were not just words.
Trump's Moscow maneuver comes as Russia repeatedly ramps up its air assaults on the war-torn country. And on the same day that Trump envoy Keith Kellogg arrived in Kyiv for talks.
The priority is weapons and sanctions, and really very decisive also decisions from our political leaders, from not only from USA but also EU countries.
With both weapons and sanctions now firmly back on the table, the tide may be turning against the Kremlin, more than 3 years since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Aaron Damon, TVP World.
And as a lot of promises float around in discussions on what support Ukraine is expected to get from its Western partners, our defense correspondent Uznański-Wiśniewski explains the importance of a substantial missile arsenal for Ukraine's continuous fight for freedom. Here's more.
After weeks of confusion over ongoing weapons deliveries to Ukraine, Kyiv looks likely to receive support from the US, including a Patriot battery. But what exactly is the Patriot platform? a defensive US-produced mobile surface-to-air missile system with a target range of around 150 kilometers, capable of intercepting tactical ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as target aircrafts. It is supported by two interceptor families, PAC-2 and 3. Although it is not clear which kind of Patriot system has been donated to Ukraine, it is likely that Kiev has at least some of the newer PAC-3 CRI interceptors, the more advanced of the two families. While PAC-2 uses a blast fragmentation warhead that detonates in the vicinity of the target, the PAC-3 family uses more accurate technology that hits the target directly. And though effective at hitting targets, using these systems is not without its own drawbacks.
Patriot missile costs, of course, a couple of $1 million per one missile, while Shahid drone costs around, well, maybe $80,000. Shooting down Shahids with Patriots is economical suicide.
Additionally, reliance on defensive weapons systems is in part driven by the priorities of Kiev's allies.
Because nobody can accuse the offerant that he gives something lethal that could be used, for example, against civilians.
Those experts emphasize.
The most effective air defense would be to destroy the air bases from which these weapons, Russian weapons, are launched, striking deep in Russian territory. That's only possible with weapons that are called offensive.
But sourcing these offensive weapons has proven to be somewhat of a challenge. Ukraine has received cruise missiles from France and the United Kingdom, the stocks of which are largely depleted. Now Ukraine stands to receive a number of weapon systems from Germany. It is not clear if this will include the much sought-after Taurus missiles. The Taurus is a long-range offensive cruise missile developed by Sweden and Germany, capable of striking targets as far as 500 kilometers away from the launch site. Importantly, it can strike infrastructure supporting Russia's war effort, such as ports and ammunition production facilities, and is capable of penetrating underground targets including bunkers.
They can carry a large warhead over several hundred, if not 1,000 kilometers distance, and they're very difficult to intercept.
And though diversifying weapon systems in order to bolster Ukraine's war effort may be vital, experts nonetheless emphasize that defenses should take priority at present.
We see the constant drone attacks on a larger and larger scale by Russia against Ukraine, against civilians, against cities. Clearly, Ukraine does not have enough of missile defense equipment.
For now, however, it appears deliveries of the weapon systems will have to wait a bit longer, as US and European allies iron out the gritty details. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
We are very unhappy, I am, with Russia.
As Donald Trump offers more support to Europe and Ukraine, the US president has also said that he is open to continuing trade talks with Brussels, despite threatening 30% tariffs on all European imports. Our correspondent Alex Cadier was at the meeting of EU trade ministers in Brussels for us and joins me now. So, good evening, Alex. It seems that despite threats from Washington and talk of European retaliation, show of teeth, increased tensions, a deal could still be done. Tell us more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is the feeling in Brussels. That was the feeling between the trade ministers assembled here today. It was very much keep calm, carry on, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That was the feeling we had from Maroš Šefčovič, the EU's trade commissioner, the lead in those trade negotiations with the United States, who has been going back and forth to Washington, D.C. to meet with Howard Lutnick, to meet with other top Trump officials to try and hash out a deal. Now, we also heard a bit of a showing of strength from the European Union. We heard that from Lars Rasmussen, the Danish foreign minister, who was chairing this meeting, of course, now because Denmark has the presidency of the EU, a very experienced diplomat, that Danish foreign minister, saying that the EU needs to know that it is not like some of those smaller economies that have struck a deal with the US. It has to stand firm. Here's what he had to say.
Friends have achieved one deal and 23 threats. So it makes a lot of sense that those of us who are threatened compare notes, as the Commissioner said. And I think we shouldn't underestimate our power. If you look at the figures, I mean, what we have on FTAs on the table substitute a lot in comparison with trade with the US. the single market. If we enhance the single market, I think the figures are very well known. If we increase trade among ourselves by 2.5%, it will substitute a decrease in US by 20%.
The message there from the Danish Foreign Minister, very clear, Claudia. He says we do want to trade with the US, we do want a deal with the US, but if we boost trade within the European single market, if we boost trade with other nations around the world, there is a way for the European Union to limit the damage of a potential trade war with the United States. And of course, there is a desire to keep talking from those EU member states. Maroš Šefčovič is preparing for the worst. He said that there is preparation ongoing for retaliatory tariffs on 72 billion euros worth of imports from the United States. But first, they want to try and negotiate. Well, a few hours after that, we heard from Donald Trump himself about whether or not he is willing to keep talking to the Europeans. Let's have a listen.
No, we're going to be talking to people. We have, I watched the show this morning. They were talking about, well, when's he going to make the deal? The deals are already made. The letters are the deals. The deals are made. There are no deals to make. They would like to do a different kind of a deal, and we're always open to talk. We are open to talk, including to Europe. In fact, they're coming over. They'd like to talk.
We're always open to talking, says Donald Trump, and we know that a European Union trade delegation will go to Washington to meet with US officials. They have a few weeks to hammer out what is a very complex deal. The devil will, of course, be in the detail, Claudia, but these talks clearly now going down to the wire.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was Alex Cadier reporting live from Brussels. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced on X that he has asked First Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Svyrydenko to become the country's prime minister. He said Svyrydenko will present a new government action plan in the near future. Why did Ukrainian president make that decision during what is a crucial moment for the future of Ukraine? John Todd has more in his report.
Yulia Svyrydenko has been by President Zelenskyy's side since the start of Russia's 2022 invasion, serving as his trusted first deputy prime minister and economy minister. She became known outside the country after signing the United States Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund deal with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in May. Zelenskyy said he wants her to develop the country's economy and arms industry.
We are initiating a transformation of the executive branch in Ukraine. I have proposed that Yulia Svyrydenko lead the government of Ukraine and significantly renew its work.
Local media report that current Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal could be appointed Minister of Defense in a government reshuffle. For Svyrydenko to become the next head of government, Shmyhal must formally submit his resignation to Parliament, which will then vote on the matter. Zelenskyy said he looks forward to the new government's action plan in the near future.
All good things must come to an end, and so after a little over 2 weeks, the time has come for the Axiom team to return from the International Space Station. The Polish leg of the mission, called Ignis and headed by Poland's Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, is not returning empty-handed, as Poland's astronaut has successfully conducted an array of experiments. More exciting details on the space, volcanic algae and other experiments in Sonia Gatabiszczan's latest report.
In preparation for a splash.
100%.
The Dragon hatch is now closed.
On Monday, the Polish Space Agency confirmed the core objectives of the country's mission to the International Space Station have been accomplished, as the Axiom Mission 4 crew is returning to Earth.
I was very happy that we didn't have any malfunctions on the way, right? Because sometimes it happens. As we say, the space is hard and everything could happen that we couldn't conduct any experiments.
The crux of the Polish Ignis mission, meaning fire in Latin, were the 13 scientific experiments conducted aboard the ISS by the Polish astronaut Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski. Among them was the space volcanic algae experiment, continuously monitored by engineers connected to the ISS.
We could collect the data about the oxygen production, about the photosynthesis, if our algae are adapted to the environment in space, microgravity, also light conditions and so on. And this is not end in this stage, because now after splashdown, we will collect the samples,
which will undergo further tests on Earth. Microalgae from volcanic grounds are intended to enhance life support systems through oxygen production, valuable not only on the ISS, but also in future space exploration, including missions to the Moon or Mars.
it's very important in, for example, food production, because if we are going for the long space journey, we are just taking a bit, yes, like small vials for of the algae to reproduce them more.
Another one of the experiment's photograph tested the astronauts' ability to communicate with the machine without engaging any muscles, using only their brain signals.
We know the general result, which proves that this communication was successful and was highly successful, highly above the randomness level. We now have proof that this technology is reliable and stable and accepted to be used for space journeys.
A concrete benefit associated with experiments that proved successful on the ISS is generating what's called spaceflight heritage, a stamp of approval that the technology tested works in space, enhancing its market appeal.
This is very important for the development of the companies, for development of the projects. So this will for sure result with profits for them.
The crew of the Axiom Mission 4, which also includes Hungarian Tibor Kapu, American Peggy Whitson, and Indian Shubhanshu Shukla, conducted a total of over 60 experiments during their stay on the ISS. The crew is expected to splash down off the coast of California on Tuesday. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
Well, time to return back to Earth. Polish tennis player Iga Swiatek is back on the WTA ranking podium. After winning the Wimbledon with a historic 6-0, 6-0 result, she has moved up in the ranking to world number 3. Many have been with her for a long time, cheering her along the way, but has that been the case with everybody? Alex Sumlinsky has more in her report.
Since winning Wimbledon and becoming the first Polish woman to ever win the prestigious title, Iga Swiatek has been at the center of a whirlwind of events. She's danced at the traditional Wimbledon Champions Dinner with Jannik Sinner, advanced to WTA World number 3 with 6,813 points, and even inspired an influencer to come up with a new racket-shaped pasta in honor of the tennis legend's favorite dish, strawberry pasta.
At one point, one of them said, why not making pasta in the shape of a tennis racket, you know, in order to somehow make a tribute to our national athlete? And we were like, yeah, let's do it, right?
However, after winning Wimbledon on Saturday, Iga had a specific message to the Polish media.
For sure, the past months, how the media sometimes described me, I gotta say, unfortunately, Polish media, how they treated me and my team, it wasn't really pleasant. I hope they will just leave me alone and let me do my job. Obviously, you can see that we know what we're doing. I have the best people around me.
The player was referring to the lack of the media's support after the semi-finals of the Australian Open, which she lost at the beginning of 2025, leading to a flood of critical media coverage. But despite that negative coverage, the majority of Iga's supporters have had her back since day one, like her childhood acquaintance from one of the first clubs Iga played at.
I'm very happy that Iga is the best in Poland, that she's number 1, and that she's winning. I remember saying this to my friends 12 years ago, if one of us breaks through and plays, it's going to be Iga. And when she won her first tournament, I felt great joy, but I wouldn't say it was a huge surprise either.
One of her first coaches also spoke highly of the tennis player.
It was obvious that she really wanted it and would devote a lot of time to it. She also had a supportive household, her dad and mom. Everyone was involved.
When handing her the trophy at Wimbledon, Princess Catherine congratulated Swiatek on her extraordinary achievement. Every road to extraordinary success has twists and turns. It's important to stay focused and supportive. For TVP World, Alex Sumlinsky.
During the meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump said he was very unhappy with Russia and disappointed in President Vladimir Putin. This change of heart could spell a turning point in the war in Ukraine, as President Trump announced more significant help to force Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. What better person to join me to discuss the shifting tides of U.S. administration in the context of war in Ukraine than Ivana Stratner, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ivana, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me on the program again.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Pleasure. So let's start with the latest. We've heard from President Trump. He said, I'm very unhappy with Russia. We will be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple, and there will be at least 100% tariffs. I mean, no disrespect, but 50 days seem quite excessive for a country that's been plowing Ukraine day and night, causing death and destruction. Why wait so long? And I thought that Mr. Trump was actually disenchanted by the Russian aggression. What do you make of this?
I think President Trump is growing more and more dissatisfied with Moscow. And he has been trying to talk nicely to Putin for months. But every time when he offered a concession, Putin would retaliate with more drone attacks. Just take a look at yesterday's massive drone attacks. So I'm equally surprised that we have to wait for 50 days. But I also think that that's part of the American way of negotiations, where it is always giving one way to your opponent to respond. On the other hand, I do believe that his decision to ramp up Ukraine with more weapons against Russia is a step in the right direction, and the United States is also preparing sanctions on Russia. So there are really some steps that are moving in the right directions. I think President Trump is understanding that Putin is not willing to negotiate in good faith. And President Trump is right to give Putin a taste of his own medicine. This is how peace through strength actually works, and it's past time to really stop Kremlin's manipulation. However, I think it's also very important to understand what Putin wants, and Putin has been candid about his desire to subjugate Ukraine. And not only that, but also to challenge NATO. I know that there is a lot of discussion about hybrid warfare activities also where you are right now in Poland, but only there. Definitely. We have sabotage activities across the West. So we also cannot be naive about Putin's actions. This morning, believe it or not, SVR just stated how NATO is dragging Moldova into a war. So this September, I'm very confident to say if we do not stop Putin now, he's not going to stop at Ukraine.
We are here to also discuss this shift that happened in the U.S. administration when it comes to Ukraine. We just spoke about the meeting that took place today. We've heard from one of EU Solidarity MPs, Ukrainian MPs, Maria Ionova, who said that this approach that Mr. Trump is taking is truly transformative. We also heard from Senator Graham, who on CBS said in the coming days you'll see weapons flowing at a record level. One of the biggest miscalculations Putin has made is to play Trump. And you just watch in the coming days and weeks, there's going to be massive effort to get Putin to the table. Let's dig deeper. Is this truly about constant Russian attacks, or perhaps there is more to it that meets the eye?
I think that President Trump genuinely wants to end this war. President Trump has been trying to talk nicely to Putin for months and months. But that is because, and with not so much success, and that is because I think many people in Washington do not understand how Putin thinks, because the Kremlin thinks differently than Washington. I would love actually to share an old Russian joke with your audience. Basically, there is a peasant who lives between two houses that each have a cow, and he complains to God that he doesn't have his own. When God offers to provide him with one, the peasant basically replied, "No, I'd prefer that you just kill my neighbor's cows." And it's exactly how Putin's worldview operates on international politics. He doesn't see negotiations in good faith. For him, it's not even you win, I lose, or I win and you lose. It's like lose-lose type of a strategy, which is very irrational for a lot of people.
And very destructive at the same time.
And that's why, absolutely, because to counter your enemy, you have to actually think like them and to understand their motivations. And President Trump was absolutely right during the NATO summit to commit to Article 5. And the second thing, he also questioned the definition of Article 5, which is extremely important given that I just mentioned Russian sabotage activities and Russian hybrid warfare activities in the West. So make no mistake, if we do not stop Putin now, he's going to continue. And I think Trump is really understanding more and more that Putin is not a guy who only cares about business and trade. Peace through trade never worked, and it will not work this time either. So I'm very, very excited really to see President Trump's new steps to show peace through strength. And I already see in Russian news that they are ready and very dissatisfied. Make no mistake, Putin is going to again start with his nuclear threats, but that's typical, Moscow strategy to make sure that we do not help Ukraine.
Let's hope these will remain to be only threats. Let's jump into the subject of Yulia Svyrydenko now to become the prime minister. We've heard from President Zelenskyy. He announced it on X that she is going to take the post. Do you think that this change actually has something to do with how Zelenskyy wants to nurture this relationship with the U.S. at such a pivotal point?
I think President Zelenskyy has been criticized a lot in the U.S. about that there are no elections in Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So he's really also trying to put certain, efforts in that sense. Why that change has just come out of the blue recently, I really don't know. But President Zelenskyy is definitely trying to make more cooperation with the United States. And as a matter of fact, what I mentioned multiple times in your show, the United States, we are not like a Red Cross just to be there to help, out of idealism. I think helping Ukraine very much helps our own interests here in Washington, D.C., because peace in Europe means also peace in the United States. And we can learn so much from Ukraine. Just take a look at how Ukraine is fighting this war, the drone attacks, and how Ukraine is building its own infrastructure when it comes to weapons. So there is so much that we can actually learn from Ukraine. So I think Trump is more and more understanding the value that Ukraine brings to the table with Washington.
We've heard from President Trump. He said that billions of dollars of military equipment will be delivered and distributed to Ukraine. Some of the weapons actually in days to come, but he made concessions that the EU will have to pay for it in full. Do you think that Europe is ready for such a spending?
I think there is so much talk in Europe about helping Ukraine. And this is truly like a ball in Europe's court. So it is really past time for Europe to step up and to deliver not only words, but weapons to Ukraine. So this is a test for Europe. And I truly hope that the leaders, whether they're sitting in Brussels, in Berlin, or Paris, will follow through on their promises. Because as I mentioned, and I think leaders also in Brussels, but also in Paris and Berlin would agree that this war is not going to stop at Ukraine until we stop Putin. So let's see what happens there. But the good news is that the United States is ready to help.
Ivana, our time is coming to an end very shortly, but I wanted to ask you this final question. With the recent announcement of those 30% tariffs that we've heard from Washington, how do you think this is going to affect the relationship between the U.S. and Europe, especially in the context of defense?
So if you're referring to tariffs on Europe, I think that's not a great, idea to treat our allies when it comes to tariffs, and that will definitely impact a lot of issues. But if you are also referring to those tariffs that are announced for Russian allies, I think that's a really step in the right direction, because Putin is already losing his allies, and this is a good signal that there are a lot of countries, let's call a spade in Europe, that are using as a sanctions invasion still to operate and cooperate with Russia. So if you're referring to those tariffs, I think that's a right thing to do.
Definitely an important feature to be able to tell who is actually on your side and who is not. Ivana, thank you so much. Ivana Stradner, Research Fellow at the Foundation of Defense for Democracies, was my guest.
Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features, and we'll see you there.